From a narrow street in Queens to golden towers and the brightest political spotlight, this is the story of a man who turned his name into an empire, fashioned controversy into currency, and rewrote the rules of American fame and power. This is the story of Donald John Trump. He arrived on a damp June morning in 1946 at Jamaica Hospital, the fourth child in a bustling household where the future often felt negotiable and ambition felt hereditary. His father, Fred Trump, was a builder who understood the New York skyline as opportunity. His mother, Mary Ann, kept the family's private life steady as her husband expanded their public one. In the cramped geography of suburban Queens, young Donald found both a playground and a proving ground, a place where reputation, confidence, and a willingness to take risks could change the course of a life. School shaped him the way his father had, with an emphasis on discipline, order, and standing out. At the New York Military Academy, he learned to command attention. At the Wharton School, he learned to speak the language of deals. Those lessons were not theoretical, they were practice. By the late 1960s, he was not simply a son in his father's firm, he was an heir with a hunger to remake the name on the building. He moved from Queens to Manhattan with an unmistakable swagger, a love of headlines, and a fierce belief that the city belonged to those who could imagine audacity and then pay for it. The 1970s and 1980s were his laboratory. He transformed hulking, overlooked properties into shimmering stages, hotels, casinos, and an iconic tower of mirrored glass on Fifth Avenue. Trump Tower rose like a manifesto, marble, brass, a private atrium that announced presence the way a brand announces itself. He tangled with city politics and financiers, mastered the optics of real estate, and made himself both the product and the promoter. He sold an idea as much as a condominium, luxury as identity, and ego as enterprise. For every triumph, there was a gamble. The 1990s brought ruinous debt and headline-making bankruptcies for some of his casinos and resorts. Yet even amid restructuring and courtrooms, he remained a showman who knew how to turn setbacks into stories and stories into opportunity. He wrote a book that read like a manifesto, The Art of the Deal, and the public ate up the myth, the mogul who did not so much build as command success. He taught a generation to admire the hard sell, even when the numbers behind the sales were messy and negotiable. Then came celebrity in a new register. Television made him intimate and omnipresent. The Apprentice offered the spectacle of boardroom theater. Millions watched him dispense judgment with a single phrase, "You're fired." And in doing so, the world learned to see him as both fearsome executive and television personality. He was no longer merely a builder of buildings, he was a builder of image. He leveraged that image into endorsements, pageants, and a constant presence in a culture hungry for personality. Fame became a kind of capital, fungible and inexhaustible. Out of that celebrity emerged a political voice loud enough to be heard beyond cable panels and cocktail parties. When he launched a presidential bid in 2015, it was a political stunt that quickly turned into a national movement. He spoke bluntly about immigration, trade, and the American economy in a voice that rejected Washington's euphemisms, and spoke in the cadences of grievance and promise. Against conventional wisdom and an established political order, he won the Electoral College and the presidency in 2016. An upset that reshaped American politics and unveiled the potency of media-driven populism. The first presidency was a study in contradiction. He appointed conservative judges and pushed through major tax reforms. He embraced deregulation and a muscular, transactional foreign policy. At the same time, his tenure was streaked with chaos, a constant stream of controversies, probes into campaign ties and conduct, and a polarized country that seemed to watch every day with the tension of an audience waiting for the next act. He governed in headlines, tweeting like a communication shop, and the tweets often became policy instruments and political weapons in the same breath. His administration weathered historic turbulence and unrelenting scrutiny, culminating in impeachment proceedings that deepened the fissures in American life. Defeat came in 2020, and yet defeat did not silence him. He continued to command large crowds, to shape a political conversation, and to influence the trajectory of a major political party. Legal fights multiplied around him. Civil suits, criminal investigations, and a drama that often read like a courtroom thriller. In late 2024, a New York case ended with a conviction tied to payments and the tangled world of campaign optics and personal advantage. An unprecedented moment in American history, a former president carrying a criminal conviction into the national conversation. It was a legal and constitutional shockwave that raised complicated questions about accountability and power in a polarized republic. And then the political rebound. In a spectacle no political forecaster expected to become reality, he returned to the ballot, prevailed in the 2024 campaign, and was inaugurated again on January 20th, 2025. At 78, he made history not just for the age of his inauguration, but for returning to power in a political environment vastly different from the one he had left. The country that welcomed him back was more fractious, the global order more uncertain, and the lines between private wealth and public office more blurred than ever before. The second presidency unfolded like a new chapter in a long American novel, one with bold administrative gambits, aggressive use of executive power, and an insistence on reshaping institutions in the image of his priorities. Critics warned of authoritarian overreach when federal powers were used against local authorities. Supporters argued he was restoring order and delivering on promises to security and prosperity. Globally, he pursued deals and engagements with dazzling salesmanship, courting foreign investments and negotiating with leaders in a tone that fused persuasion and performance. Domestically, his decisions often landed in courtrooms, where legal arguments about presidential power, immunity, and the reach of the law played out under the public glare. Through it all, his personal brand continued to be a living ledger. Clubs, hotels, licensing agreements, and an omnipresent Trump name that found ways to monetize public attention. Supporters saw a commander who spoke plainly and challenged elites. Opponents saw a man whose methods eroded norms and tested the boundaries of democratic governance. Both views underscored the oddity of a figure who is simultaneously admired, reviled, and stubbornly central to the national story. But beyond policy and profit, there is something more elemental, a narrative about reinvention. He built an identity from bricks, brass, and ratings, and when one career dimmed, he pivoted to another. That capacity to pivot, to translate setback into attention, to remake the terms of engagement between celebrity and civic life, this is perhaps the deep through line of his life. Yet for all his appetite for spectacle, Donald Trump's story is also a study of consequence. The institutions he touched, the press, courts, a major political party, the presidency itself, emerged changed. The country he governed remained profoundly divided, alternately buoyed and wounded by the same rhetorical style, the same promises of greatness. For his supporters, he has been an icon who dared to shake the system. For his critics, a warning about what happens when ambition outruns restraint. And so, the final chapter is, for now, unwritten. He moves through courtrooms and campaign stages, through gilded rooms and global summits, an aging showman whose every gesture is analyzed for threat and meaning. Some see an elder statesman of a new conservative realpolitik, Others see a lingering threat to procedural norms that once seemed unassailable. Most agree on one thing: whether you love him or loathe him, you can't quite take your eyes off him. This is the story of Donald John Trump, born into a practical ambition in Queens, forged in the markets and on television, elevated to the highest office, and returned again to its power. It is a story of deals and defiance, charisma and controversy, and a country forever changed by the spectacle of a life lived large. The tale is still being written, and whatever the pages that follow hold, the mark of his life on America is already indelible.